Hello, welcome to the next Origins episode. A quick disclaimer before we get into the video, as you will notice shortly if you're watching the video. If you're just listening to the audio, you're not going to notice any difference, but if you watch the video, you will notice that instead of it showing myself and Sarah at the same time, it alternates back and forth between whoever is speaking. I made some changes to my Zoom settings, and unbeknownst to me, the default with those settings was to only do the speaker view instead of showing both people at once. So again, if you're watching the video, that's why it's alternating back and forth. I have since changed the settings, so going forward, that won't be an issue. And if you're listening to the audio, you won't notice any difference. Thanks for watching, and without further ado, here's Origins Episode 3 with Sarah LaChance. Welcome to the Weekly Akasha Podcast. This is Origins Episode 3 with my friend Sarah LaChance.
Hello.
And I am your host, Jacob Benson. If you're new here, and because this is a new channel, it's pretty much all of you. These Origins episodes are about celebrating the lives of human beings during this pivotal time of transition on planet Earth. We're talking about lessons learned, the path and journeys taken, the highs and lows, and everything in between, how these spiritual awakenings and remembrances have taken place, and how we are individually contributing to the rise of the collective consciousness on planet Earth. So again, if you're new here, thanks for being here. I'm thrilled to have you, and trust that if you've air quotes randomly found this video in some way, that there is something here for you. So sit back, relax, get ready to learn about Sarah and her journey. Hopefully laugh, maybe even have some of your beliefs challenged or stretched, and possibly even get triggered by something, which if that happens to you, you're welcome in advance. So Sarah, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So we were talking before the episode started, and Sarah and I have known each other in some capacity for almost 3.5 years now, which is crazy. And I found her light language artwork through the magic of Instagram all the way back in June of 2021. I had to go all the way back in our chat history to find that, which means I was probably following you well before I ever messaged you. The classic vibe check thing. And I had come across light language in my own way. And I had taken a class from Jamie Price, which if anybody is interested and wants to look her up, it's Jamye is how you spell her first name. And I had come across your work, and I had tried to do some stuff on a computer with light language and failed miserably because I had no idea what I was doing. And then I came across Sarah, and she had created this really amazing digital light language. And so I had reached out to her about, how in the world are you doing this? Because even as somebody who had worked in technology my entire life, I had no idea what I was doing. And, that's led to 3.5 years of some clashes and some sessions and some full moon, new moon meditations and healings and that kind of stuff along the way. And I guess where I want to start is, so the reason you were very good at making digital light language artwork is because you had a career as a fashion designer.
Yes, that's right.
And I don't remind me, was that because when we first started talking, I believe you were in Arizona, but were you working in California before that?
Yes. Yeah, I was in California for about 20 plus years, working in the fashion industry.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that. How was that, like a lifelong thing you had wanted to do, or how did you get into that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like as a teenager, I I never thought about going to college. I never thought about anything. I wasn't great at school. And one day I decided to sign up for an art course. And I realized, oh, there might be something here. I really enjoy it. And then that collided with my love of fashion and style. And so I basically started to seek out different fashion design schools. And the one that I sought out was in New York. And I'm from New England originally. So that was, I think it was FIT. But my transcripts got sent to FIDM, which is in Los Angeles. Now I didn't want to go to Los Angeles. I had never even, heard of this school. But so I end up going out there with my family and decide I'm going to make this move to California. And I knew I wanted to do fashion, and that was just something I never second guessed. And I think it was 2000 and I started immediately using Adobe Illustrator and Adobe, Photoshop and things like that, along with art. And so that was incorporated into the things that I did.
Okay, so you said something that I have to get clarification on, which is
Okay.
how do your transcripts accidentally get sent to a different school entirely across the country?
I don't know. We
Like,
still don't know. I'm
okay,
seeing orbs fly all around. I don't know if you're seeing them, but there's a lot of, yeah.
well,
I
I'm feeling a lot of energy moving already. So,
yeah.
um, which seems to always happen when you and I get together. But it's interesting that I didn't feel it start until the recording started.
Yep.
But were the transcripts sent from like your high school?
Yeah, I guess so. They must have, instead of sending them to FIT, they sent them to FIDM. So I don't know
Hmm.
how that works. Um, yeah, so I went to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. My family and I still kind of talk about that. We're not sure how that happened, but we went with it. Sometimes you just gotta, I think I needed to be in California for so many reasons. There was so much self-discovery that happened there and
Hmm.
emergence of myself.
So, as somebody who has oftentimes fought what later turns out to be like divine inspiration or confluence or whatever, did you, so your transcripts get sent off.
Yeah.
Did you at any point be like, no, this is absolutely wrong, send my transcripts to this other place and still try to go to that school? Or were you just like, you know what, I guess I'm just going to go with it and that's going to be it?
Hmm. No, there was definitely some resistance. So the resistance all happened when I got to California. When I was already in that school, I tried to see if I could transfer to New York. But I'm like this 19-year-old. My parents have spent like this money sending me out to California, sending me to this prestigious art school, design school, and I'm trying to go to another one. And then financially, it just wasn't there. So there was some point where I had to just say, okay, I'm going to surrender. I'm going to stay here. And then I'm going to move to New York, which I never did.
Oh, that's right. So how long was the school program? Is it like a condensed program or is it more like a typical 4-year kind of thing?
The first school I ended up going to was a 2-year program, and I received my associates in I believe it was, I don't know this, fashion design. And then I actually went back to school and received my bachelor's in fine arts, fashion design. So I have a bachelor's in fine arts.
And where is that from?
That is from the Art Institute, which was
That's
also,
also in California?
yeah, I think they have locations all over the world or all over the country, but yeah, it was in California.
Okay. Okay, so you get out of school and you start doing what?
I get out of school and I start working for a celebrity stylist, and I'm her assistant. And we're going to, behind the scenes of Jay Leno. We're prepping Rod Stewart. We're prepping Lisa Marie Presley. We're going to her house. We're going to Beck's house. We're doing all working through the night. I'm working for this celebrity stylist. And it wasn't what I had envisioned. And this woman was not a great woman. She just wasn't. She told me I could never cry. I could never give her attitude. I could never do anything that would make her uncomfortable. So I was really at her beck and call. And it wasn't until one night I had worked late with her. It was till about midnight. I got home, I showered, I got in bed, I went to sleep. The next day was Saturday. Well, apparently she wanted me to work that day. So I had lived with roommates at the time, and I woke up and she was standing over my bed. Can you imagine your boss in your bedroom standing over your bed? So, needless to say, I quit a few weeks later and I started working with this small company, and I was a seamstress. I helped sew clothes, and the company's still around. It's called Eva Varo, and she was like my first boss and my first mentor. And I worked really, really hands-on, cutting things, sewing things. And then it wasn't until much later I worked my way up to designer. I had to work as a technical designer, an assistant, an associate, and then I finally climbed the ladder. And so many people along the way dropped off because it was such an intense work environment, and it was very toxic. It was there was no boundaries. They would just replace you. They didn't care if you weren't coming in Saturday, if you weren't coming in Sunday, you were being replaced. And there were so many girls behind you that wanted that job. There were so many people that were itching for the job. And I remember my first like real 9 to 5 after working with this other woman where I was a seamstress. I was an assistant designer and I got paid, I think, $20,000 a year. And I was working 7 days a week. And basically my paycheck was gas there and back because I would spend an hour and change each way in the car in traffic. And so it was a lot of those experiences in fashion.
Is
And
that pretty normal for that industry?
yeah, it's a pretty dark industry. I'm surprised it hasn't been exposed for what it is and how they treat people, and how it's very mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive. It's not a great industry, and it sounds glamorous. You want to work in fashion and you want to live in LA, but you're often in these old warehouses in Vernon, LA, or downtown LA next to Skid Row. There's asbestos, there's mold, there's all these conditions that you're working in, and it's gross.
And how long did you do
Rose
that
in
for?
fashion. 20 years. 20 years from when I graduated to when I said I had had enough.
All at that same company?
Oh, no. Many
Okay.
different companies, many different companies. It's a very much a revolving door kind of industry. You really don't stay at a place for more than a year or 2 or 3, and then you're moving on. So there's a few jobs that stand out in my mind where I was there for a couple of years. One of my last jobs was more fun. I got to travel. I got to travel to China and to India and just explore. And this is when my spirituality really was emerging. So that was a really great time.
I'm just curious. So knowing what you know now, which we will get into, do you feel like for you being at all those places, like that your energy was like needed and important there? Like, do you feel looking back that just your presence made any kind of a difference?
That's a good question. Maybe, yeah, maybe at some of those places. I was told that I was too nice. I was told that I needed to be a bitch and I needed to be mean, and I didn't want to. It's interesting that we talk about energy because I felt like I was giving so much of myself. I was giving so much. I didn't have much of a life. And I had this realization that I wasn't getting anything back. And that took me a while to process. It took me years to process after that and try to change my relationship with the industry. but it was very firm in its footing. Didn't want to change, didn't want to budge.
Hmm. That's funny to hear you say that, because all the feedback that I've gotten, well, prior to, let's just say, like 2020, really 2018, most of the feedback that I got in my career working in technology was, you're too much of an asshole and you need to chill out. Because I was very type A, very, I'm the smartest person in the room. Nobody else is good enough. I can do it all by myself. I don't need any help. So it's very interesting to hear you talk about basically being on between the industry and just also the way you are or were, just being that different. So that's
Yeah.
fascinating. Oh man, I had another question that was similar to the one that I had asked. Oh, so I mean, I've worked in technology my whole life. I still pretty much work in technology in various ways, although it's certainly shifted, but it's definitely like, it's just, I'm just interested in it. And it's just like, I just get the concepts and even all the new stuff with AI and crypto and blockchains. And I've been around long enough that I realize that, like, oh, like this thing is just, it's just like this thing, but a little bit different. And so my mental models and the way that I understand it is really nice. But I've never really wanted to get out of working in technology. And there was never anything that tried to get me out of that industry as a whole. So I'm just curious, while you're in this industry and you're working 7 days a week and you're giving so much of yourself, was there ever a time where it felt like spirit was trying to, other than like the end when things like shifted big time, which we'll get to, but like while you were in it looking back, was there ever like, was there ever any like a crossroads presented to you where you're like, spirit was like, you can stay here or you can maybe go down this path if you want to? Or did it always just feel like you were just in fashion and that's where you belonged?
Yeah, I think there was always like this little nudge in the back of my mind. I was very asleep, very, very much asleep. And even after I woke up, I'm like, how did people not tell me how asleep I was? Because I don't even remember a lot of that part of my life, which is interesting. And there was this nudge that I always like to get out of California. There was always this nudge to get out. But I never knew there was nothing else I wanted to do, because from the get-go, I knew if I'm going to be working for the rest of my life, it better be in something that I love. And that was initially fashion. It was the creative outlet. And so I think that there was a certain there was always a like, I got to get further. I got to move on to the next, maybe this next job, I'll be happy. Maybe when I get this promotion, I'll be happy. Maybe when I get up to designer, I'll be happy. And I think that's where my mind was. It was like there were little seeds planted along the way, but like little nudges, but I was just so asleep. I really was. Just
Okay,
kind of,
so that's a beautiful segue into the next question, is which is, and you kind of touched on this when you were talking about your traveling around, but so when did you start to feel like you were waking up?
I remember I was in a relationship with somebody for 6 or 7 years, and he's a wonderful person, such a wonderful person, but I knew I didn't want to be with him anymore. I knew that we were better off as friends, but I felt this pressure to do what's right, to be with this person, to marry this person, to do all the things that we're taught, to get the job, find the person, get married, and all that stuff. And I remember ending that relationship, and I was probably in my early 30s when it happened. And that is being able to take that leap and to say, I'm I'm not, this is doesn't make me happy, and I'm going to be true to myself, was one of the first times I'd ever done that in my entire life. And that's when I started to change my diet, and I started to kind of have different outlooks. And so that's just like the baby beginning of this awakening for me. And feeling that sense of freedom and being proud of myself for trusting myself because I didn't trust myself. Does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, so I also have had that feeling with a relationship, and it was the last serious relationship I had before I met my wife. And it was just, I mean, things were fine, but it was clear to me that this was not this was not it. And fundamentally, I did not have the awareness of this part of it at the time, but like there was just a lot of things about myself that I didn't even like, that would have made it nearly impossible for anybody to even be with me. Like that's just not a thing that can last, especially in these times, which I mean, I've got a lot of friends who have gotten divorced, separated,
Mm-hmm.
you know, all these things that they were never happy about, like the last 4 years have really just brought the light to all of those things. And you either have to address it together and agree that to change, to modify, to come to compromise, whatever it is. And if you're not willing to do that or you can't do it, like then you've got to go your separate ways. And I've seen like a lot of that. Um, and I remember talking with this person and being like, listen, we are both miserable. Like we can't do this anymore. And I like there was just silence for you know, it seemed like an eternity. It was probably like 30 seconds. Because this wasn't even in person. This was just over the phone. Because I think we were trying to figure out something to do for dinner, and it turned into like the biggest, stupidest couple fight you can imagine. And she was just like, you know what, you're right. And just like what a relief that was.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, like once that happened, like now I'm back by myself again.
Yep.
And I mean, I just dove so heavy into podcasts and books and personal development and all of this stuff that I had just neglected because I had been with this person and people before them. And when you're with somebody else, right, that just, you don't have as much time for yourself. And I really went down into that. And it wasn't even 3 years later, I met my wife, which, you know, 3 years kind of seems like a long time, but it's really not.
Mm-hmm.
And what a uh, profound transformation that led me to. So that's a long-winded way of me asking. So like once you decided to break it off and that happened, did you feel like a relief and then like, okay, I'm ready to, like an almost like an excitement, like now that that's done, I'm I'm ready for me.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like I didn't know who I was before, and that was like my journey to self-discovery. Like I finally started to lean in. I didn't like myself. I was always judging myself. I was constantly in a state of judgment of what so much pressure I'd put on myself. And this gave me the space and time to really start to discover myself and the things that I liked. And it kind of was like the same energy of this isn't working anymore. And that, you know, I can't even imagine if I would have stayed with this person. And they're just the kindest person. We're still in contact, just like family member, nice person to me at this point. But we both knew that, you know, things needed to change. And I think that was really this beginning of me coming back to myself, of, you know, taking these layers off and peeling back the layers to my authentic self, to who I am.
And what year was this?
I want to say this was 2000, maybe 12 or 2011 or 2012.
That's amazing
Yeah.
because my wife and I met in 2012.
Oh, wow.
So, the timeline that I was presenting was it had been maybe 2 years before that when I had broken off the other relationship. So, okay. So you do all that. You're feeling great. You're like,
Mhm.
Sarah's awesome. I'm going to get in touch with real Sarah. I'm going to find real Sarah, but you're still working in fashion, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So how did that go? And then were there ways that, and I'm breaking question asking rules by doing two questions at once, but I feel like they're related. So, but once that happened, were there ways in which working in that industry do you think helped accelerate that for you in terms of, like, I think of it as the industry showing you, here's all the things that I don't like and that aren't, um, that I'm not in agreement with. Therefore, the opposite of these things must be what I do like.
It took a while. It took a while. I think honestly, what at that point, what started to change is, like I said, my diet. I started to, doing these half marathons. I started to lose weight. I was really overweight, really unhappy. And I was working a job that I had to travel. This is like all kind of coming around the breakup too. So these were other factors that happened around the breakup in the same 6 months. I was working at a job that I was traveling like 2 hours each way. So I had no life again. And I decided this is one of the things that definitely changed. I decided I was going to go to yoga on the way home and just avoid the traffic. So there was this really adorable little yoga studio in Sierra Madre. It was right off the freeway. And it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. And I remember it was like the studio, the lights were dark, these wooden floors, and we just had these really beautiful yoga classes, and then they would serve tea, and it just like kind of changed me a little bit. And through that, I decided to leave my job that I was at. So I had the breakup. I left the job I was at. They were really an abusive company. I took this huge risk of taking my first design position. So I'm still really in the design element, but now I'm doing a little bit of yoga, and it's helping to relieve some stress. It's helping me to come back to me. So I would say that in that sense, I think I knew I wanted to be treated better at work. And so I would seek out companies that were going to treat me better or value my time and my boundaries. Does that answer your question?
Yep. Now I'm curious though. So how did you end up at this yoga studio? Was this you were driving by and saw it? Did somebody recommend it?
I think I was driving by and I saw it. I was exploring the area and I saw it, and I thought, this feels like I just felt a pull. And that's a really big, a really big part of my change into where I am now. Just listening to that nudge and saying, my body was sore. I was getting sciatica from sitting in the car for 4 hours a
Oh
day
yeah.
in that stop and go traffic. And so I needed to stretch, I needed to move my body. And that really, it was intimidating. I'd never done yoga or anything like that. And I felt safe there. So
And how long did you go to that yoga place for?
I probably went there for about 6 months, maybe 6 or 7 months, and before I left my job. And I wasn't in that area anymore, so I didn't go to that studio anymore.
Gotcha. Um, okay. So you're doing yoga, you break up, you get into yoga, you decide you don't want to sit in traffic 4 hours a day. You take a semi leap of faith from what it sounds like. You quit your job, you get a new job, still doing design, still working in fashion, still doing Sarah things. Um, what was kind of the next step where you felt like, um, and I'm hearing like a quantum leap where you felt like things, um, was there a moment, I guess, where you felt like something had shifted, even if you didn't know what it was?
Yeah. So the next company that so this is an interesting, I took a leap of faith on this one job. They needed a designer. It was a small company. I knew it was a risk, but this was my first design position. And they were sending me to China that first week. They were sending me to Shanghai. And I was excited, you know? So I get the job, I go to Shanghai, I do, do the design work, but they're kind of fly by the night. I don't know if that's a word. You know what I
Fly
mean?
by the seat of their pants.
Yeah, I don't know. They weren't really a grounded company. They weren't really rooted in anything. They were kind of new. So I end up getting laid off, but I had my resume, I was sending it out. And because I had designer on there now, because I had this designer experience, I got hired at this company, was a really great company in Culver City. And they were right across the street from a yoga studio and they offered free yoga at lunch.
Mm.
And so I would go to yoga there at lunchtime, and that was my lunch break. And it was like a happier environment, and people were like, it was just the best environment I'd ever been in. They just didn't pay very well. So that was a challenge for me. And I started to awaken even more to different things then.
Was that through, I guess, just the practice of yoga, or was it also people that you met and just being in a different place?
I think all of it. All of it. Yeah.
And how long did you last at that design job?
Probably about a year and a half, maybe to 2 years before I had an old coworker reach out to me about a job that she was heading this design, a very established company in LA. And she was heading the design department and she was trying to gather a team together. And she had thought of me and she, brought me in and they were offering me quite a bit more money and a bigger position. And so I took it and I went.
And okay, and what year are we in now?
I think we're in like 2014 or 15 then. 2014, I want to say. Yeah.
Okay. Was this the last design job, or are we still building towards that?
This was the last design job before the real awakening. And then there's still a couple jobs after that, but one really main job after that. There's so
Gotcha.
much that happened in this time frame that's it's unbelievable.
Yeah. One of the things that I realized when I recorded my little short episode was I'm pretty sure I need like 4 more episodes
Yeah.
to really. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even talk about this, and I didn't even talk about that, and I totally forgot about this, and
Yep.
um whatever. Okay. So new job, new
Yeah.
company, still doing yoga.
Still doing yoga, not as much, but still doing yoga. Giving my life to this job, giving my life. This job was a pretty big awakening for me and the energy exchange I was giving. I was working till 10 o'clock at night. I had no life. I was just, they were asking me to make 100+ samples a month, design and have them made, get all the fabric, get all the trim, get the pattern made, get them sewn. It was like this, it was just like a repeat every month, every month. And then there was these side projects, capsules that need to be done for Kohl's, for Macy's, for all these other companies. And it was exhausting. My creativity was dying. It was stifling. It was stifled. It was just, it wasn't there. And um, it was also fun. I had fun. I met a lot of really wonderful people there. We took some amazing trips. I had like a bond, but maybe more of a trauma bond with the girls. Um, and so I believe it was, I don't remember what happened. I had come back east for a holiday. I think it was a wedding. It was, and then I think in 2000, oh, I can't even remember the date, but anyway, I came back and it just kind of occurred to me that I just couldn't do this anymore. And I just quit. And I believe this was in 2016. And so that year was a little bit of a challenge for me, and an identity challenge. I had gotten this one job. I just couldn't stay. It was just so bad. Like the energy was so bad in there. This was the first time I ever really saw anything psychically, but I didn't know I was seeing it. I was seeing this black goo dripping down the walls with my third eye. I didn't know. I wasn't in tune yet. And it was like the darkness of the people there. I couldn't stay in the building. I couldn't. So I ended up getting this other job. And simultaneously, I have a friend ask me if I want to take a yoga certification.
So yoga's back.
So yoga's back. And I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm even ready. I can't do these people are, I'm in LA. These people are doing yoga. I can't, I've only been doing it for however long on and off.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome.
Yes. And so I remember it was like the last night to sign up. And I am like at the PayPal, I'm at my computer. It was $2,800. And I was going to have to max out my credit card. So I'm like really on the fence, but I decide I'm going to do it. I click it, I buy it. And that rest of the night, I'm crying. I'm trying to get the money back. What have I done? Like this feeling of dread. And like, it was such an interesting night of all the emotions that I went through. What I didn't know was it was a little bit of an initiation to trust myself and other things. So I sign up for the yoga certification.
Okay. I want to hit the pause button quick
Okay.
because I have to go back to the black goo running down the walls and you saying that like you didn't, like you weren't aware of what exactly it was going on, but it also doesn't sound like you ever, like it crossed your mind that it was weird.
Yeah, that is true. It was,
Which is what, we were talking before and I mentioned the fact that I keep saying that like this awakening that I've gone through and the experiences that I've had has been the weirdest, most normal thing ever. And hearing you describe that, it was just like there was clearly a part of you that was like, this is happening and like nothing's wrong. Everything is fine. But hey, like Sarah, something is happening. Something's different.
yeah. Well, I still didn't trust myself at that point.
Right.
And so was I crazy that I was seeing this black goo dripping down the walls? I was seeing like feeling dark entities in the warehouse there. Like there was a part of it I didn't even want to enter, I didn't want to go near. So yeah, it was normal, but also I didn't really realize what I was seeing.
Right. Which is probably for your benefit or
Yeah. Yeah.
it just goes to show that like even in that situation where you're actually seeing darkness manifest, that you were protected by your soul, your higher self, I am presence, whatever, guides, angels, whatever you want to call it, that was like, hey, like we're showing you this ability that you have, and we're showing you that this place is not right for you, but you were also not given more than was right for you at that time.
It's interesting because I'm just making a connection as you're talking. This was a children's company I worked for.
Oh boy.
Children's clothing. Now that I don't know that that makes a difference, but it was a very dark place. At the same time I was working there, I worked there for a very short time. I started taking my yoga certification at the same time and also left there at the same time I was taking the yoga certification and found a new job. So it's interesting how that happened. Like the first collision of me seeing the black goo and then really having everything open up at that same time. That's just coming to me. I'm just realizing that now.
Beautiful. So you talked about sitting at your computer, trying to decide if you were going to do this or not, and then pushing the button. I'm curious, in that moment, did you you know, did you ask God for help? Did you say, give me a sign? Did you tune into anything? Or you're just sitting there with your brain and yourself and being like, am I going to do this or not?
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't, that wasn't asking any exterior force at that point, or understanding the gravity of the situation that was happening, holding in front of me.
Okay. Well, you did get signed up. You didn't get your money back. You took the course.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like something or some things happened during the taking of this course that really started to open up your abilities.
Yeah. So the yoga certification, it was in downtown LA. It was weekend. So Friday night I would leave work and go straight there, and then come back Saturday and Sunday. And it was pretty intensive. But it was yoga, but it was also breath work. It was chanting. It was you know, Hindu, like the deep, rich history of the Hindu gods and goddesses and deities. And it was so much more than yoga. Like, it cracked me open. And when it cracked me open, I realized that I have had abilities my entire life, like gifts, spiritual gifts. I used to see, this is something I blocked out for a long time. I would see spirits at the end of my bed when I was little, and I was afraid. So I would run and sleep behind the wall where my parents' couch was. I would curl up in a ball, and then they'd find me and they'd send me back to bed. And nobody ever believed me, but I could feel things, I could see things. And this was just like a normal thing for me as a kid, until I finally shut it down, because it's not good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that happened. Also, the first time I ever had compassion for myself in my entire life, we were in, it was one Friday night, and we were going to do a walking meditation in this class. So everybody gets up and they just get into a meditative state, and they start walking around the room, just slowly walking. And I remember when we finished, the teacher asked, anything come up? And this woman in the class said, well, the person in front of me was just walking so slow, and I was so annoyed by it. And I remember thinking, oh, I wasn't even like thinking about the person in front of me. I was so consumed in myself, and like, am I walking too fast? Am I walking too slow? Is the person in front of me annoyed with me? Is this? And I'm like, oh my God, if I'm beating myself up in a walking meditation, what am I doing to myself in my everyday life?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very big aha moment for me. And I remember on the way home was the first time I ever had compassion for myself in my entire life. And I cried the whole way home. And I was never the same after that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact day that I realized something similar, but I do remember, you know, which is when um, you know, I had basically run myself into the ground on multiple levels. And the universe had tried, you know, in retrospect, I realize this, but they had tried rather extensively to get me to chill out and to calm down. And in my way, I had just completely ignored all of it until I really had no choice but to calm down, which manifested through a series of car accidents and concussions and some other stuff.
Wow.
But I had started um, doing like the daily meditation and the calm app. And at one point, I had done it for like 200 and some straight days for like 10 minutes a day. But it was some point in there, and all those meditations were, and I assume still are for the daily ones, is really just about, it's like 10 minutes of just being with yourself, and just, you're not trying to do anything other than just breathe and just focus on the thoughts coming in and just letting them go. And it was somewhere in there where I realized, like, everything that I'm saying to myself is basically just like, I'm hot garbage and I'm a piece of shit.
Right.
And it's like, just the awareness of that, because once you have the awareness of it, then you can say, well, how do I change this? Like, how can I change this? What can I do? And you know, I've heard that a version of what you said and what I described from many people. And once you have that realization, there's something that's so powerful about that, that at least in my experience, nobody's goes back after that.
Yeah.
They don't decide, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to keep treating myself like crap.
Right. Right. Can't go
It's
back.
amazing, you know, listening to you. Like, I've had jobs that were very not good. The energy was bad, even though I didn't think about it at that time. So hearing you talk about that, it's amazing thinking about how much crap we're willing to just take from other people, from jobs, from external entities, whatever that may be. And then we do the same things, and I think much worse to ourselves. But there's something about that. As soon as you realize that, like, I'm doing this to yourself, that there's this part of you that is like, yep, and now we're just not going to do that anymore. And
Yeah.
then you start to figure that out.
Yeah. And it takes time too.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
these are all learned behaviors and responses
Yeah.
that get so wired into our energy and our nervous systems and our behaviors that it is truly like the peeling back of an onion, where it's like, okay, I keep having this thought about myself. Why? Where does this come from? How do I, like, negate it? What do I need to change? And then you figure all that out, and then there's just this other repeating thought, and you just start peeling that back. So I guess as I described that, what was that like for you? So you had that first experience and you cried the whole way home, and like, it feels to me like you felt like a combination of relief, but also like excitement.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a really beautiful moment for me. And after that, there was um, a devotion that began to unfold, a devotion to exploration, to questioning things, to just almost an invitation for to meet my true self, because I didn't know myself for so long. I was just asleep and doing what everyone else wanted, and I wasn't questioning things. I wasn't, there was nothing, spiritual essentially about me. But there was, at the same time, there was things that showed up that I look back now and say, oh yeah. But I think there was the biggest moment was this has helped me so much. Like, I had felt so much suffering. I was addicted to sadness. I was addicted to suffering. I was addicted. I always had this heavy layer over me, heaviness. And I never knew what it felt like to just be okay, to just be happy, to just, oh, I can breathe. And I felt that hope for the first time in my life. And I knew that I wanted to help others feel it too, because I knew there was people out there, that there were people out there who had experienced just living in suffering, because we thought that's the way. We're conditioned for it. We're conditioned for suffering. And I was very much conditioned for it. And so I would have to unravel who I was to discover, you know, the hope and then the truth of who I am. So I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to devote myself to healing myself. And I knew I wanted to leave fashion. And that was something I really knew. And I remember thinking, well, I'm just gonna let this ride out. It's not gonna happen right today. I would still continue on in fashion for the next couple of years, knowing that I was gonna leave.
And
But I
so
had,
how much, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
So after you had that first experience, coming home that night and crying, and you felt all that, was that like at the end of the yoga class, or did the yoga class keep going like on past that? Because I'm
It kept
curious to,
going.
like, okay, so yoga class, you have this experience, you keep going to the class, but then the class is over. You're still working in fashion. So then, like, what's going on now?
That's really a point where I know I'm leaving fashion. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know when it's going to happen. So after I had that night that I cried, The class was probably a couple weeks out from ending. And so I was still in the class. I was still going to work every day and still experiencing this. And um, once the class ended, once the certification ended, I continued going to yoga at the same place. And I met a community of people that I had never met before. People who were open, people who were spiritual, people who helped open me up and show me who I was. I was afraid to speak. I was afraid to talk. I was afraid to introduce myself. I was afraid to use my voice. And teaching yoga is the first time I have ever really been up in front of people and like done something that scares the crap out of me. And it felt so natural. But I would actually go into what I would say after my certification would be one of the darkest times of my life. Going from one of the most beautiful experiences to one of the darkest, but also I'm learning. I'm into Reiki. I'm interested in Reiki now. I'm interested in crystals. I'm taking certifications while I'm working because I know it's possible. And so, yeah, I'm doing that. I'm still working in fashion during the day, but at night and on weekends, I'm taking certifications and I'm learning. And I'm learning intuitive healing, Reiki, like I said, all of it.
So when you say that it was one of the darkest times, but it also sounds like it was one of the most exciting times. So when you say the darkest, is that just the contradiction between working at a job in an industry you know is no longer aligned from you, and you're just trying to survive off the energy, basically in every minute of your free time, you're doing these things that feel aligned, and you feel happy, and the healing and everything else? Was it just that, or was it something else?
It was that, but there was some very difficult lessons I had to learn. Like, for example, I went back to work for that abusive boss who I remember I started yoga.
The celebrity?
Not the celebrity one. No, this is the one that I was driving 2 hours there, and from
Okay.
getting the sciatica, I started going to yoga. This woman, she
Oh
was
yeah.
kind of like a terror.
So
And
this is the classic universe coming full circle
yeah. So
thing.
what happened is, in a long story short, right after my certification, I met this man. And in that time frame, I also got a job offer in fashion in North Carolina. So this is like months after my certification. So I am still seeing this person, but I decide I'm going to move across the country and take this leap of faith. It kind of turns out to be, I don't know if I was supposed to move there. I still think I wasn't supposed to, because I end up losing all of my belongings, and pretty much 80%, and then 10% broken. So I had like nothing left. I end up moving out there, living there for about 4 or 5 months. And then I decide I want to move back and I want to be with this person. And so I move in with this person. And a few weeks after I get back, I get a job offer for this horrifying woman who has started her own company and wanted me. And that was probably one of the worst times of my life, because she was a terror and the relationship was not good. It was very toxic, probably the most toxic relationship I've ever been in. And so that time I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot of lessons. And it would be, I ended up leaving the job with the woman. I stayed there for a little over a year. And because I actually got, this is funny, but I got a call for another job. The job that I had worked at before I left for North Carolina called me, and they said they had a position for me in another office. And that was the last job I ever had in fashion. That's a lot, I know.
I am just
Yeah, a whirlwind.
I am astounded by your resilience. Like,
Thank you.
and I'm also just like, just clearly like seeing these, like, it's almost like when you were at these jobs previously, kind of what I'm seeing is there were like these energetic loose ends that need to be tied up, which is why they came back to you.
Mhm.
And there were some lessons you needed to learn that you didn't take care of like the first time, basically. And then it was like, you're just like, I'm seeing you just like, you're getting like punched in the face. And the universe is like, these are the lessons, learn the lessons. And then it's like, okay, move on. Here's the next thing. Tie these things up, learn the lessons, move on. And okay.
Yeah.
um, all right. So you have your last job in fashion.
Mhm.
When did you know it was actually going to be your last job in fashion?
When I accepted it.
And was this like an intuitive knowing, or was there?
Yeah, there was no, I wasn't gonna, it wasn't gonna be long term. And I remember I was the person that I was with, I told him, you know, this is my last job. I'm gonna start my business. And this is now 2018, 19. So in 2019, that person and I parted ways. And this was I had gone to India and had this huge spiritual experience. I'd gone to India for work, for fashion, and stayed there for a couple weeks. And I was at that company, and I got back, I moved out, and then boom, the pandemic hit.
Mm,
And when the pandemic hit, I remember in January, I was at my job. I was pretty heartbroken. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to be doing this for much longer. And I don't know why, but I was hanging by a thread at that point. And I had this inner knowing that I was not going to be doing this. And I didn't know anything else. That's all I knew. And then 3 months later, I got let go from the job.
right. So that would have been like right when the pandemic started then, right? Like March or April.
In March. Yeah.
Um, I would love to hear you talk because you're the second guest I had in a row now who went to India for work, basically, and then had like a spiritual experience. So if you want to, whatever you want to share about that, was it a yoga thing? Was it some random thing? Did you go looking for it and or did it just find you? Like whatever you want to share about that, I'm very curious to hear.
Yeah.
'Cause I
So,
haven't heard this part from you before.
yeah. Yeah. This is a great story, too. I worked for an Indian company. And so they had sample rooms and they did production in India and they also had China. Now I had been to China before, but I had that summer, 2019, I had planned a big trip for work to be in India for 3 weeks and then China for 2 weeks. And at that point, my relationship was on the rocks. And so I was also terrified of flying. I had to go to India by myself. And I'd gone to China and I didn't love it, but there was an extra nervousness because it was going to be like a 25-hour trip.
Yeah.
And so I remember throwing up before the car picked me up to go to the airport. And I was again back and forth. Should I go? Should I not go? I end up going. I get on the plane. I get there. And I get to my hotel and they were like, we don't have a room ready for you, but we've got the penthouse suite. So do you want to stay there? And I'm like, okay. So I'm in this huge place, like this huge, it's like a dining room, living room. Like it was gorgeous. I'm in this gorgeous room, this penthouse suite. And I end up being able to stay there the whole time. And I've got my cards and my journal with me. And I remember that's when my relationship fell apart. And this person basically ghosted me while I was on this trip. And we were living together and it was a really perfectly beautiful time for that to happen, because I was forced to be in a completely unfamiliar area by myself, part of the country. I was by myself traveling, and I really leaned into my practices. I really leaned into the cards I got. And I remember um, making that effort to journal every morning and to just be with myself. And they had at the hotel these massages that you could get. And I think it was shortly after I arrived, I got one of these. It was, oh gosh, I will butcher the name of it, but it's the type of massage where you lay down and this bucket of oil pours over your third eye, right?
I've never even heard of such a thing.
It's like an abia. I don't know the name of it. I can't remember, but it's a certain kind of oil. And so this oil starts to drip over. It's a constant drip through on your third eye. And then you're also getting like an oil like massage kind of thing. And so I'm in that, and I'm having like, I'm going in and out of consciousness, in and out of dimensions. Like there's a man there. And it was just like such, I mean, I don't think I was the same person after that. If anyone, I know they offer them here in the States. I'll be I can't think of the name, and I'll butcher it if I do, but it was amazing. And um, that really changed me. And then my boss came and flew in, and she took me to a couple temples, and we got, the bracelets, the red bracelets that are protection and prayers. They're like red strings they wrap around you. So I got blessings when I was there. I was able to go and chant Hare Krishna. And that was something that was really deep from my yoga certification. To go and to chant and actually be in India and like be chanting at this temple was, my heart was alive again for the first time. I remember getting a bunch of like, got Shivas, I've got Kalis, I've got, Lakshmis that I went and I got all these things when in India and brought them back with me. And that like I have them in my home, and they're just such a token reminder of like how far I've come. And so that was really my experience there, just like coming back to myself. And it was such a big trip for me. And I think I was rewarded with that sweet, like that's abundance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I took that leap of faith, and yeah. And then after I got back, I moved out, and then the pandemic hit, and then I was alone for a year in my apartment, pretty much isolated.
Yeah. And so when did you start your business?
I started my business probably in 2020 to 2021, around that. I actually left LA in March of 2021. So, and that's really kind of the full steam ahead commitment to run my business. And I had started taking clients, and I was teaching yoga. Before the pandemic hit, I was teaching yoga and, doing meditation classes at night, and offering services at night when I could.
When was the moment where you were um what am I trying to say? So you're doing these different things, you're teaching yoga and other stuff. When was the moment where you were like, yep, this is it. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing?
Um,
Or you feel like, oh, like even if it wasn't like monetarily wise, where you were like, you know what, like I've made it. Like this feels like
this,
everything about this just feels the opposite of what it feels like to work in fashion, basically.
I think probably like when I got my first Reiki client, I remember I just like, I gave, my first Reiki session, and I felt like this is what I want to do. Like I had known that I was going to do something to help other people. I just didn't know what it was. And so like the pieces of the puzzle were coming together. And by the time, 2020 hit, I had already taken a second yoga certification, and I was I was just ready to start a business. I didn't really know how it looked, but I knew 100% that's what I was going to do. And um, it was a long journey for that, though. It wasn't just like an
Yeah.
easy, I'm going to do this and then it's beautiful and it all was well, you know. But I did take my Reiki master certification in June of 2020. And that is another thing that really accelerated my growth and changed, because I knew when during that class that I wanted to teach. I had been kind of on and off the fence with Reiki before that, but once I got into Holy Fire, and I took that master class, I knew I'm going to teach this. This is going to be part of what I'm doing, and I'm still teaching now. Um, and then after that certification, I came here to Maine for 2 months to stay with family because I had been alone in my apartment for the first, 7 months of the year, and um, came here, went back to LA, and thought, why am I standing in the rubble of my own life? I'm standing in the rubble of my old life. I don't have a job. I've ended this relationship. I have no passion to go back. I missed Maine. I missed being near the ocean. And so, yeah. And then light
Yeah,
language came in.
okay, so we'll hold there for a second because I just want to share with everybody that this is why. So Sarah's Instagram is Sarah of the Light. I have jokingly always referred, not always, but for a while, called her Sarah of the Waters because every time she would go back to Maine, she would just post pictures and videos of her being by the water. Um, and that it's kind of funny, but I also feel like this is probably a big part of why you moved back, but there's something very aligned about you and being with, in, and around water. Like I'm seeing, I mean, even listening to you describe what I'm sure was an actual very chaotic experience working in the fashion industry, and you're just so calm and measured about it, and listening to you talk about it, I just am seeing like you've just flowed through all of this just like the water. So
I love that.
um
Yeah,
small side tangent there. um
I like that.
right, so you're back in Maine and light language happens, which is how we met, so we've almost come full circle now, so talk about that.
Yeah, so the summer of 20. Oh, so should I talk about now me being back in Maine or when I took that trip? Well, after I took that trip, I got home and that Christmas I told my family I'm gonna burn it down. I'm gonna leave. I'm never going back to fashion and I'm gonna leave LA, and can I have your support? And there was not a lot of support there. There was, are you out of your mind? Are you crazy? All that stuff. So I packed up all my stuff to put in storage in LA. I remember getting a job offer 2 weeks before I left, and I turned it
Yep.
down. I never told my family.
Universe testing you one more time.
Yep. So I go to put my stuff in storage. I drive to Arizona because I have relatives there. It's cheaper to store my car there. I store my car, I pack my suitcases, and I fly to Florida to stay with my parents for a couple months. And I'm really immersed in my business at that point. And I'm doing light codes. But let me just back up a little bit, because after I got back from Maine, that in 2020 is when I spontaneously was, I guess, activated with light language. And that was in October of 2020. And that's when the beings came.
Friends from the other side.
Friends from the other side.
So
And
I mean, so did that just happen like on a random Tuesday? Were you like in a meditation? Were you
kind of.
driving? Were you just kind of minding your own business?
No, it was pieces of things, like, it was pieces of the puzzle coming together. There was signs and synchronicities and things that were just coming in little by little. And I was taking a quantum class, and I feel as though this class is what really awoken that. awakened that within me. Yeah. And at the same time, I started working with my mentor, my shamanic mentor. And I remember she had seen codes coming in for me. And so it was just really little things happening until one night I went to bed. I think I had an activation in this class, and then I went to bed, and then there was beings in my room. And the beings were, they wouldn't let me sleep. But again, I didn't really think much of it. And so they were like, you got to get up, you got to write this down. So I got up, I wrote in my journal that I was meant to add healing or codes to my healings, and that I was told that everybody has a soul frequency, a soul code, and that I was going to channel that for people. And they specifically called it a soul code. And they said it was like a sacred tone that we all admitted. Yeah, I think that's the correct word. And that basically it's kind of like an attunement for your soul. And it's to help you become in line, but it's very healing. It brings back the parts of you. It's also activating. So it's bringing new parts of you online. It's healing. It's, I think, even more complex than I can still understand right now. There's so much more to it. And so that was like, at that point, I was like, this is crazy. I'm not doing this. I shut my notebook. I went back to sleep. And then, a few weeks later, I opened up the notebook and I just decide I'm going to just play around in Adobe Illustrator. And that's when I created my first code. And that's when I realized I've been drawing codes my entire life. And then it just started from there.
Man, that's so cool. I have to ask, like, when these beings showed up, did they, I guess, present or introduce themselves, or were they just like, hi, Sarah, we need you to do this?
Yeah, it was more of a telepathic. I do physically see energy and orbs and spirits, but I didn't physically see them. I saw them in my third eye and I felt them there. And telepathically, I felt Arcturian energy, Syrian energy, but heavy on the Arcturian energy. And I felt there was three. One was very tall. And the color blue also came through. But yeah, I was more of this like nudge to get up, like a telepathic nudge to get up. And then the energy just channeled through me.
Amazing. So that happens. You go back into it. You realize you've kind of been doing it your whole life, which is the big like aha moment, right? I remember I have always described myself as a visual person without really understanding what that meant until probably the last couple of years and realizing what like a superpower that is. And it's something that can be developed and enhanced just like anything else. So as you start doing this, as you start doing more of it, you start working with clients. I guess, is there, well, let me ask this, because you weren't doing this when we first met, but when did you really start doing soul codes for people and like offering that?
I will say that the transmission of me wanting to do soul codes happened in October of 2020. And then I started offering them in, I want to say like March or maybe April of that following year, I think. I did my first soul code. So it must have been like 2021. I mean, I have been doing light language and things like that. I've been like, doing the artwork, but then the codes were in 2021, I believe.
And after, what was the experience of doing that first one like?
It was just, it blew my mind. And every time since then, it blows my mind, because if I'm sitting down to do a soul code or another piece of art for somebody, I have no idea what it's going to look like. I'm not going in, researching, finding images and bringing them. I'm starting with a blank canvas. I'm opening up my channels and then I'm just allowing it to flow through me. And so, depending on people's guides, the assistance is different. It can be really easy and I'll get like, no, there's more information, or oh, this needs to go here, or it needs to look like that. I'll get that sometimes when I'm working, but mostly it's like I finish and I'm like, how did this happen? Did I do this? Or I'm just the channel, I guess. Like, I don't know. Like, how does this happen? And that's still, it amazes me every time. I don't know how it happens.
That's amazing. And I think it's a perfect, what you're doing with the soul codes and the artwork and Adobe Illustrator and also your own gifts is such a perfect, I think, example of the marrying of life on planet Earth and the physicalness and the tools and technologies we have, along with all of this other stuff that is available to us that we can't just see yet in our own day-to-day experience, right? But is not any less real than anything else, including like the desk that I'm sitting at.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Before I get to my last question, is there anything else that you want to, I guess, share that we didn't touch on that you think is maybe important or valuable for somebody?
I would say if you are thinking about taking a leap of faith and taking a quantum leap, it's going to look different for everybody. There's no right or wrong, but you have to trust yourself and you've got to do it. Doesn't matter what anyone else around you says. I know that's like difficult when you've got people who support you and who love you, but this is around, you're not working in logic anymore, you're working in spirit. And there is a melding of both, yes. But I would say if you're feeling the pull, listen to that pull.
Beautiful. All right. So we've talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You've done and are doing a lot of stuff, but at this point in your life, what would you say your superpowers are? If Sarah's a comic book hero, what are her powers?
Oh gosh. I think you kind of talked about one of my superpowers. I'm able to really shift and change. And it took me a long time to get there, to flow with spirit and to flow with the different changes and directions that I'm guided to. I think that is one of my superpowers, my adaptability. Um, Also, right now, personally, one of my superpowers is resting. Learning to rest in a background of never taking care of myself. So I think that is, and teaching other people to rest is a big part of this year for me. But yeah, I don't know. I guess like a spiritual superpower would be seeing the shapes and the codes and the colors and being able to put them on a page and being able to help people through art. That is something that really lights me up.
Beautiful. All right. On that note, thanks for watching Origins episode 3 with Sarah and I. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about her journey. I certainly have. I've known her for 3.5 years, and I learned a lot about her during this episode. I hope you've gained some valuable insights, inspiration, and perspective from her story. If you take nothing else away from this episode, just know that you're not alone on your own journey. Sarah and I and many others are here to support you along the way. If you like what I'm doing here, I'm inviting you to join the community by subscribing to the channel, following me on social media, leaving your thoughts or comments in the questions below. There will be links to Instagram, etc. in the description for myself. To learn more about Akashic readings with me, there will be a website link in the description. To learn more about Sarah and her work, we'll have her links in the description of the video as well. If you want to check out her soul code artwork and other things, that's all on her Instagram page, and we'll include all that in the video description. So thank you for being a part of this journey with me. Your energy, engagement, and presence matter and make a difference, and I am grateful for you. Stop recording.